Let's explore sex further through the intersection of sex, sexuality, and the four brains and their operating systems. So we have the reptilian brain, we have the rational brain, we have the empathic brain, and we have the transcendent brain. Now, sex at a reptilian level is increasing the possibility field, is increasing the odds of both good and bad things happening out of that possibility field, meaning there are certain possibilities, certain probabilities that only happen if one in a billion times, right? If you run the simulation, you'll see that with this level of development and this operating system, this particular outcome only happens 1 in a billion times. Well, you need 8 billion people for 8 of those possibilities to emerge, 8 of those probabilities to emerge, and you may need 8 of those probabilities for one of them to become actual on both the positive and negative side. And all sex, sociopathic or otherwise, increases the size, the volume of the possibility field, the probability field, and the actuality field. At a reptilian level, sex gratifies lust, right? It's an instinctual drive. It can be a form of power play. It operates within the fight, flight, freeze paradigm. So when you have two people in a reptilian frame of mind, using the reptilian operating system, you have the hunter and you have the escapee, right? And so when there's a high level of trauma in a culture, there's a fair amount of blood that's going to the reptilian brain. And to the extent that the drive for sexuality is present, overlaid on that operating system, sexuality is pursued by the masculine principle as the hunter and the feminine principle as the runner, you know, the one avoiding the chase. And then you have the freeze dynamic happening when it's inefficient to protest or fight when there's a capture, right? So sometimes you'll have a freeze and shut down dynamic. And this occurs psychologically as well as physiologically, meaning many people who do consent to have a sexual experience with a fair amount of blood flowing to the reptilian brain want, meaning their arousal is strongest. One's arousal is always strongest based on where the blood is in the brain, right? Where is that attention? Where is that energy flowing? And so when there's a strong concentration of energy and attention in the reptilian brain, the highest arousal levels will be fantasy of rape, right? So you may consent, you may be in the rational domain in choosing your partner, but the role play that you want to engage in is, parent-child, right? So you're dealing with a power dynamic there, or rape fantasy. I want to hunt someone down and conquer them, etc. And I want to be conquered, right? I want to be raped by someone I feel safe with, but that's what arouses me. So the arousal template of the reptilian brain is fight, flight, and freeze. And whoever is in the masculine role, male or female, will seek the pursuit, the hunt, the conquer, the seduction. And whoever is in the feminine role, male or female, will freeze and wait, right? Because, and there is, and it's not going to happen in another way, right? When two people are in that operating system, it requires a hunter to chase, and it requires a recipient to freeze or flee and be caught. And that dynamic has to occur, or there is no sex. Because the reptilian brain does not, initiate an empathic attraction. It is a biological instinct at that level. And it's also worth noting that, this instinct, this drive is present in a lot of animal life. And it's also worth noting that in the early, the earlier human animal stage, that most sexuality would be considered rape today, meaning there wasn't any language in asking for consent, and it was an instinct of pursuing and submitting, in the same way that you'll see a chicken or many, animals today. There's an aggressive assertion instinct, and usually, sometimes the female will freeze, sometimes she'll move along, sometimes she'll ignore, but there is a persistence to a point where there's a connection, and then sexuality and procreation occurs, and evolution occurs, because life has a pattern of iteration. A small percentage of all of life's creations deviate from the norm. And those deviations, a small percentage of those, are the hope of all life, are the next step in the journey. So in that sense, all of us are children of the reptilian brain. All of us are descendants of what we would now call rape. So the function to definitely procreate, to expand the possibility field, and the sexuality and the rational brain. The rational brain is the pattern analyzing brain. And the rational brain has a relationship with the sociopathic brain, the reptilian brain, as well as the empathic and transcendent brain. So the rational brain as a pattern analyzer could be called a turbocharger or booster to sexuality from the other brains. And as we move from the instinctual animal to the rational reptile, the rational sociopath, the function of the rational brain is to analyze the pattern and increase the efficiency of results. So this is the entire territory of seduction, of deception, of betrayal, of game playing. It's a pattern analyzer. For example, the pattern analyzer combined with the reptilian brain, there's an instinct of lust, and that then passes through the analytical brain that says, what are the ways to fulfill this lust with this person? So it's an objective orientation. I want to fuck this person. And so the analyzing starts. If I rape them, I will go to prison And prison and fear is a necessary deterrent of the reptilian brain because it is a fear-based brain, right? And so if there's no deterrent, if there's no downside to rape and you're in a rational reptilian paradigm, then you rape. It's as simple as that. So the discipline of law and fear of reprisal, fear of punishment, is an acknowledgement that we as a culture, we are, as a species, are as highly traumatized members of a highly traumatized cult or culture. We are very largely fear-based, meaning if you take away all police, all reprisals, there is a tremendous deviation from the behavior that you see if you have order instilled by fear, right? So we have a cult, we have a culture that if you drive recklessly, you have your driver's license taken away. If you don't have that, driving becomes more reckless, more accidents go up. If you don't have IRS tax collectors with the ability to seize homes, etc., the percentage of people that pay their taxes goes way down. And then the people who would have paid their taxes say that's not fair that they're not paying their taxes and nobody pays taxes, right? And so you have a collapse of the power structure because as a reptilian population, without fear and the threat of pain, there are all kinds of things that are good that don't happen. And the same is, of course, true with sexuality, right? And you can see this in herd mentality, right? In different places, for example, after a war, you can see mass rape. In the Philippines, the Japanese raped like 80% of Philippine women because there's no reprisal, meaning they're not going to be held accountable when they go back to Japan. They may even be rewarded, and there is zero scrutiny. And so you see, obviously a highly traumatized brain during and after war without the fear of reprisal moves into rape, right? But you also see the evolutionary thing, because what that means is that a large percentage of the Philippine population today are descendants of rape, right? But they're, they're more in the rational reptile and moving into empathy, right? Meaning you can go from pure reptilian up into the empathic forms of lovemaking in a few generations, despite the circumstances of birth. And to a smaller extent, you can do that in, a single generation. But the rational reptile will then say, okay, rape's out of the question. I want to have sex with that girl. I mean, the biology of the body is calling towards youth. Because the vitality, you have a slow descent in vitality, right? So the pure procreation drive, the baby is going to be physically healthier with a 15, conceived with a 15-year-old girl or young woman than a 20-year-old. And the baby coming out of a 20-year-old is going to be healthier than coming out of a 25-year-old, and there's a slow decline. There's an increase in percentage of Down syndrome, percentage of a variety of things, the older the person, right? And so, after a body is pretty much, fully developed, right? From a purely stem cell biological, level, having sex with a young person is beneficial biologically, but not culturally. And the rational brain is includes the cultural pattern, right? If you're going to get shamed and thrown in prison and your child's going to be taken away with you, well, then, then either the sexuality becomes more secret, right? It goes below, underneath, biologically driven beneath the culture, or more likely statistically, sexuality says, okay, well, who's the most attractive above this age, right? And then there may be similar pressures if there's a lot of shame, because shame is a process of ostracization, which creates financial and other impacts which create fear. If there's going to be shame at an age discrepancy, then that may press things in another way. I remember when my first girlfriend was, I think, 58 when I was 26. There was all kinds of psychological pressure, questions, right? Meaning this was breaking the mold, and people didn't understand it. People didn't seem to, flow with that as easily as if I was picking someone my own age or younger, right? Because that tends to be more of the pattern, right? Because a female that's looking for protection at a biological level for the child is going to be attracted to competence and power, which means money, skill, confidence, etc., because that's better for the baby biologically. So instinctively, a younger woman will be attracted to a more competent man, which tends to be a little older, right? It takes time to figure out what you're doing. And instinctively, a male will be attracted to the youngest woman of whatever, template they're attracted to, because that's going to create the healthiest child, right? So at a biological, instinctual level, there's going to be that dynamic. So obviously, a younger man being attracted to an older woman is breaking that mold, right? And it's so what it's saying is that's not coming from a biological instinct. That's coming from a pattern analysis of something different. And in this case, my analysis is that couples spend 80% of their time communicating and only about 5% of their time having physical sex. And so optimizing for a high quality of verbal and emotional communication. So older people are more emotionally mature. So there's a deeper depth, a deeper comfort with intensity of emotion. And there's a higher skill in self-awareness and articulation. So if the optimization is for that, someone over the age of 50 is statistically going to be double the maturity, intensity, et cetera. And so it's a different optimization. So that just says that, I was optimizing for what seemed like the majority of things that couples did. I was optimizing for relational competence over child production, right? And so a very good mental, emotional sexual relationship, not as strong biologically, right? And so the goal was not to have, a child. And so that's the kind of analysis that is going on mentally, rationally. Now, the rational brain is sociopathic, meaning it doesn't have feelings, so it gets its drive from the other brains, right? It's just analyzing patterns, and under a fear, fight, flight, freeze dynamic, what it creates is a very high efficiency. So you get deception, lies, betrayal, rape and secrecy, bullying, various dynamics to secure the lust agenda in a more efficient way. A rational reptile might go to a poorer country. In fact, I knew a Filipino man who would go to the Philippines and give out iPhones to young women to have sex with him, right? So he would, buy $10,000 of iPhones, and so that was a very rational analysis, right? He wanted to have sex. He didn't want to rape, people. They all wanted iPhones, and so, he would have his pick of biological age, and you have sex with me, and I'll give you an iPhone, and in that dynamic, right, you have freedom, right, because that's what they want, that's what he wants, right, and so there's an exchange at a rational reptilian level. Like, they're not loving him. They're just saying, it's an hour of time. It's a lot of work to get an iPhone. I might not get an iPhone. I'll go up in rank. That's rational reptilian thinking. I'll go up in social rank if I have an iPhone. I'll have a year or so of enjoyment of this. So I'll do something I don't want. And so you get also the prostitution level of sex happens at the rational reptilian level. Now, the same is true, by the way, at the prostitution level of anything, right? We have a culture where millions of people go to work every day at jobs they don't like, doing things they don't want to do because they will get money that can be turned into survival and security. Right? When people have their survival and security needs met, you don't see them going into work that they hate to do things they don't want to do in a way and in a place they don't want to work. So the prostitution stage of cultural evolution includes all of the things that everyone in that culture who has not met their survival and security needs to a certain threshold will do for money or its equivalent that they don't want to do, whether it's having sex with a rich person that they're not attracted to, or having sex with a rich person they're attracted to but they don't like, or betraying someone they do like in order to have money. This is all in the prostitution, but it's no different than I will cut down a forest to get a raise. I like the forest. I don't want to cut the forest, but I want to feed my family. So we're in the dynamic. It's no different. Whatever you do that you don't want to do in order to get money is prostitution, right? You're prostrating your values in order to secure survival and security, right? And this is the nature of evolution, meaning people do not transcend the prostitution level of their existence, right, until their survival and security needs are fulfilled to a level that they are no longer afraid of the consequences that come from doing what they want to do, right? And in a culture that is tremendously judgmental and shaming to those who put their values and beliefs ahead of money and cannot pay rent and become homeless and the like, there is a tremendous charge of fear that says, get a job, doesn't matter if you like it, doesn't matter if it's against your values, make money, pay your bills, or you're nothing, right? That's very highly sociopathic, and the response is highly prostitutional. Okay, I'll do that so as not to be shamed by my cult. Now, so pattern analyzing, okay, people like having sex with people who are like them. Okay, I like that music too. I don't like that music, but I'm going to lie, right? I'm going to deceive. I'm going to hang out at, I'm going to see where the prey, right? So when we're talking about the hunter analyzer dynamic, it's like, okay, they walk out of the building every day at 5 p.m. Okay, I'm going to be there. Okay, their favorite food is this. I'm going to offer them this. I'm going to do the things that increase the likelihood of this leading to sex because I want the sex. And this is the pattern that's most likely to secure it. So this is all in rational reptilian territory, right? And, and the same is true on the other side, right? When you understand that you're dealing with a culture that is in a prostitutional stage to a large extent, the rational reptile says, okay, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to wear my money. I'll drive a Bentley. I'll wear a Rolex. I'll have a chauffeur. I'll have a mansion. Because that will attract, I don't care about that. But statistically, all these women will want to have sex with me, right? All these women will want to have sex with me if I have these symbols of security because they're in a prostitutional stage, right? And so statistically that works, right? So you have, a prostitutional, I will become what that instinct wants, right? So that instinct will be drawn to me. So I will become a prostitute and do work that I don't like doing and buy things I don't care about so that other prostitutes will be attracted to me, right? So this is, of course, the typical male stereotype, and and it's more complex than that. But at a rational reptilian level, in let's say 100-year-old stereotypes, this is the the stage of development, and it is sexuality as a rational reptile. Now, as we move beyond survival and security, what happens as we reach a point, and it's different for each person where this point is, but when a human animal reaches a certain point in survival and security, they feel safe enough to open up the empathic brain as the primary operating system. Now, family, right? Family can, and it's not black or white. You can have an empathic dynamic with these people and a rational reptilian kind of relationship with these people. Family has often also been strongly linked with survival and security. And so you also have a confusion between the love of loyalty, which is just a protocol that says if we all fight for each other, the whole family will survive and be secure more than if we betray the family, right? Because that's been a proven model. A network of family members loyal to one another will get better results than than an individual, right? Because a cohesive network can form synergies that create a massive energy that can effectively compete better with an isolated individual, right? So that protocol, out of survival and security, the need to be loyal, to get an inheritance, to get support, to get the blessing, to get teaching, to get a reference. Depending on the cultural dynamic, the prostitutional stages, I hate Dad when he does that, but I'm not going to say anything because I'll be cast out of the family. That's prostitution. I disrespect my brother, but he'll beat me up if I do that. And if I ask my parents to choose between my brother and I, they like my brother more, so I'll be out. So we're into prostitution again. So I'm going to stuff that. I'm going to bury that. I'm going to hide my feelings. I'm going to pretend I'm not gay. I'm going to pretend because that will keep the network together that facilitates my survival and security. It is a level of relational prostitution. So as we move into empathy, which happens when survival and security are fulfilled at a level that the fear reduces, that there's blood, that there's energy to pay attention to empathy. Now, the easiest way to tell if you're in an empathic territory is these two questions. Who is in the most pain? Because that's the beginning of empathy, right? It always begins at the beginning of empathy. There's always pain inside and out, because the sociopathic prostitutional paradigm produce an enormous amount of pain on an empathic level. So who is in the most pain? How can we help? Right. When those are the two questions that are asked most of the time by most of the people and acted on, then you are in a primarily empathic protocol. So the protocol of empathy is, first of all, to acknowledge the relationship, which is to acknowledge the connection between everyone. That is the empathic protocol, to acknowledge the connection with everyone, the value of everyone, and the need to respond honoring that connection and honoring that value. That's what empathy is. I know what that feels like because I feel that way. So even though I'd like to just leave my garbage cans out on the street, it's not nice, is it, right? Because the whole neighborhood has to look at my cans all the time. And I'll bet they would enjoy looking at the neighborhood without garbage cans, so I'm going to work harder to move them in and move them out. Not out of fear, because there is a tremendous amount of cultural programming that is fear-based and rational reptile. Right? The rational reptile also moves their garbage cans in because it's not worth the hassle of having everyone, fuming at you. When you can exploit people, when you can save less energy if there isn't any of that going on, right? And so the rational reptile will move the cans in because that's expedient. The empathic person will move the cans in because that's a nice thing to do, right? But the empathic brain does not get priority within the hierarchy of the brains until survival and security are met, one, or when they're in the process of being met because you are in an empathic cult. If your cult is caring for those who are in the most pain, who have the highest needs, and prioritizing those people. So you can see, for example, women and children first. That is a protocol of empathy, right? When you can see that consistently and you are rising and you have trust in the empathic nature, then you feel gratitude, you feel love, and even before you are independent in your survival and security, you have the safety to be in an empathic territory, right? If you're in sociopathic terrain, knowing that whenever you have a weakness, it'll be exploited. When you're in sociopathic terrain, you must reach independence of survival and security and feel it before you will have the impulse to meet your third need for love and belonging by moving into that territory. So once you become, right, if you are fortunate enough to become primarily a human being rather than a rationally reptilian prostitute, once you are primarily a human being, your focus, it's fun to care for other people. It's fun to love people. It's fun to trust people. It's fun to be trustworthy. That is a ton of fun. And so you do it because it feels good, right? It feels nice. But but it has to be safe to do that, which means you've got to have, if you're in sociopathic territory, you've got to have your own survival security met. Now, at this point, the pattern analyzing brain serves a completely different focus. It says, what would be the nicest birthday party for this, person here? Oh, that'd be nice. Or what would be what kind of sexuality would this person really enjoy? Well, first of all, when you're in empathic territory, you don't want to have sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex with you. Why? Because it's a win-lose, right? When you're in an empathic terrain, it's win-win or no deal. Now, when somebody feels like they've lost, like, I could have fucked that person, but, I was just about to manipulate them and this other person ruined it. They're not in, they're in rational reptile, right? When you're in the empathic brain, you lose when the other person is not happy, right? Right? So your first interest as an empath in sexual terrain is the other person interested? Secondly, you're interested in, would it be good for them? Like an empath will say something to themselves like, okay, you'd like to have sex with me. I get it. It's hot, adrenaline and all that. But you've got an exam tomorrow. And if you miss that exam, you're going to have to spend a whole year of your life redoing this, and it's not going to look good, and your job prospects, your whole income might go down by 10% for the rest of your life. And that could affect your children. And so I'd love to have sex with you, but what's really important is that you study tonight. Now, what am I describing? I'm describing a good friend, right? So when the empathic brain is present, a good friend is present. What is best for the other? And I enjoy that. And what is best for me? And I enjoy that. Now, if I'm in an empathic state and have survival and security met, and my partner is in a reptilian state and does not have survival and security met, then there's a couple of things going on, right? First of all, I may not be as empathic as I think if the person close to me is chronically in doubt of their survival and security, right? Because if I say, who's in the most pain, how can I help? And that's not me, that's my partner, and I'm not helping, then I'm not fully in the empathic brain. I may be in the rational reptile, I may be in the rational empath, where I say, I'd like to help you, but teach a person to fish and you feed them for a lifetime, give them fish and you feed them for a day. It's really important that you learn how to fish. And so I'll help you in an emergency, but I'm not going to just be, what I want to be doing is watching you grow, because I may not be around. I could die. I could lose everything, and I want you to grow, right? So, but in the empathic territory, the question of the analyzing is, what's really best for that person? So who wants to have sex with me? Number one. For whom would it be good to have sex with me? Like, that would be good for them. Like maybe they're feeling depressed. They don't have any big thing going on in their life, so it's not going to be a distraction for them. It's not going to ruin a relationship that's good for them. They're depressed, they're feeling low levels of pleasure, they're attracted to me. Okay, so it would be good for them to have sex with me, and they want to have sex with me. And then, okay, so what's the way? How would you like to have sex with me? And then what would be the container that would make that an optimal experience? And how to go about it, right? So these are the questions of the rational empath, right? I want to have a good impact. I want it to be a good experience. And this is, I think, what will have that result. So, rational empathy as a basis for sex. So this is negotiation, win-win. Now, if you have the empathy, right, because you can also be in this state, you can have the empathy like, oh, I really like this person, I really want to make them happy, but I'm underdeveloped rationally. It didn't occur to me to think that you're having an exam tomorrow. I just want to make you happy right now. So you have a low level of sophistication as a pattern analyzer, right? So so that's, so there's a continuum of development, of excellence in each of these brains, right? You can be in hunt, fight, flight, freeze mode, and you can be, a warrior that can come out of any duel winning, right? So you're a good hunter or a good fighter. You can be a great runner and you can be a great hider, right? So you can be in the reptilian brain and you can be low competence, like I'm in a fight, flight, freeze mode. I just don't know how to fight. I don't know how to run, and I'm not very good at analyzing it. So I'm a dumb sociopath, right? Well, becoming a better sociopath is going to be necessary to survive in a reptilian environment, right? Becoming a super efficient sociopath to create enough superabundance in a reptilian environment that makes it safe to become an empath may also be important, meaning we may be stuck as reptiles in a reptilian culture for our entire life if we're incompetent reptiles that are constantly exploited by the reptilian nature of others that will take advantage, right? And so we're constantly traumatized and frightened, and we stay, and we'll stay in the sociopathic brain until we become good enough to, at the very least, fend off the reptilian behavior of others, the usury, the betrays, the lies, the taking advantage, the imbalanced thing that, because there's a whole bunch of sociopaths walking around looking for people that don't know how to defend their boundaries, that will give them more and take less, that they can exploit, right? And so until you get enough competence at the sociopathic level, right, you can't spot another sociopath. I mean, that's a pretty low level of reptilian competence. To say this person wants to have sex with me, to use me, they're the kind of person who would take off a condom mid-act in order and impregnate me because it feels good for them for 10 minutes and then they'll leave me with a child. Not a very good, So if you're not smart enough to spot a sociopath, you're too dumb to graduate out of the reptilian scarcity paradigm. You've got to develop enough of your own inner reptile, fight, flight, freeze, to be able to say, okay, there's a reptile, there's an empath, and I'm going to choose the empath, and I have a strategy for deflecting the reptile that is not interested in me, meaning a reptile is not going to do what's good for me just because I want them to. A reptile is going to keep trying to steal, break, use until it is easier to do it to someone else, right? And then that person is going to have to learn competency in that territory. So we have the rational empath as a highly sophisticated, efficient person at generating value from a paradigm of win-win or no deal. We can't create something win-win. Okay, fine, no deal. I'll create it with here, right? And so you have that. And then finally, you have the transcendent brain, because you're beginning to soften the boundaries. Empathy equalizes, right? Empathy says, if you're in a lot of pain and I'm in an abundant state, I feel better giving some of my abundance to you. until your pain reduces to a point where you can enjoy and be present with me. That's what empathy does, right? And so in a truly empathic circle that is based on competence, meaning you've moved up through the reptilian and rational reptilian stage, you respond to each other's traumas, etc., help each other out, and you stay in a trust-based empathic relationship of love. And sexuality then is an act of friendship. This would not be good for me. This would trigger me. Oh, but it would feel really good to me. I don't care about you. Well, you're in reptilian, right? So when you have two competent empaths, you have a very high level of grace, a very low level of pain, a very high level of trust, very low level of fear. And sex is what we would call a human loving relationship. It's when two human beings as opposed to human animals are relating. And it's also when you find more creativity in love and sexuality. When you have a rational reptile in fear and insecurity with, let's say, a human being. Well, if the relationship is imbalanced to a certain degree, the rational reptile will not want the human being to be happy with other people. Like, let's say it's a win-lose relationship. You know, this person is really wants to talk about these ideas, and this person doesn't want to talk about idea. They want to survive, right? Well, this person will say, don't leave me, I don't care about, your well-being, right? And if someone is truly empathic, they may help to facilitate more survival and security, right? Or say, your protocol of just leeching and feeding rather than developing isn't really good for you. So I'm going to separate, and maybe you'll find another leecher or so while you're young and attractive. But, eventually you're going to have to learn to become independent and to feel safe to a point where you could be a human being in relationship as two human beings caring about the other rather than having an agenda other than the other's well-being. Now, as that creates a certain level of safety, a certain level of warmth, a certain level of love, human love, what happens is more and more moments open into what's called transcendence, the awareness of unity, the awareness of connection to all things, the awareness of connection to the environment that gave birth to us, the awareness that the problems of one person are really the problems of the entire species, of all of reality, right? Transcending the limited definition of self. And orgasm can be a profoundly transcendent experience for those able to, experience it. And so sexuality can be a liminal doorway into a transcendent experience. Sexuality can also take place outside of the cult's judgments and stereotypes and rank, right? Because a cult will rank people by age. They will rank people by rank, by cult rank, prestige, power. They will rank people by money, another form of power. They will rank people by dress and appearance. They will rank people by competence. And in the reptilian period, there's a draw. I want to be near you because you know more than me. I want to be near you because you have power, etc. And so there's a ranking system within the cult that defines attraction. But when you're dealing with love and sexuality at a transcendent level, you're talking about the divine essence and the potential of all beings, of all human beings. And so the whole bigotry, the old and the young, you move into more of a state of innocence, right? You have more creativity. You transcend the cult norms. And sexuality becomes more of a spontaneous experience that it doesn't mean anything of within words. It's just something that acknowledges our relationship to all things, or it may be something in service to the divine, in service to something bigger, right? And so that's on a foundation. It can be accessed through psychedelics and heat. Certain things that take you to the edge of life tend to take you into that transcendent state, near-death experiences. So extreme trauma can open it up as we dissociate from the body and connect. In a more sustainable way, it occurs to the degree that we have the maturity and capacity to be interested in it, on top of a high level of love and belonging, on top of a high level of safety and security, when there is a certain amount of a network where we can start, because the sociopathic protocol of exploit what is weaker than you, run from what's bigger than you, and freeze when neither of those are expedient, that is a protocol that denies the innate connection of all things. That is a protocol of distance and dissociation. So typically one doesn't enter blissfully into transcendent awareness except when one is in an environment of human beings, at least, like able to empathize with one another and prioritize empathy over fear. It's not usually accessed. And the rational overlay to that is things like, this is all rational dialogue right here. This is not a transcendent moment. This is a rational dialogue. So the rational overlay is once we all get our shit expressed. I'm jealous of you for that. You never paid me back this loan. So the rational brain says, if you want to have a transcendent experience, first of all, it's a wonderful, high point in life to have a transcendent experience. So in order to build that up solidly and in a safe way, you first develop the skill and create a ritual, a protocol of dealing with your shit. I've always felt angry at you for making me small at parties. Well, if your group doesn't have the ability to resolve that and to notice that that's an opening into a safer moment, and to respond to that, then it deteriorates into reptilian at that point, right? As one person is expressing their feelings, the other one is becoming more reptilian in response. So that's the dynamic. But let's say everyone goes through that protocol and you clear up the issue. You clean up the frayed ends, the incompetence within the relationship. You do a good job. Well, that's step one, says the rational transcendent seeker, right? Clean up the shit. 2, create safety. Create a time where you can integrate. You have let's create 3 days together, right, in a circle where we don't have all the other crises that are constantly stimulating fear. We're not going to watch the news. So this would be a rational way of laying the groundwork. Like we're going to go down to South America and we're going to prepare for a psychedelic journey. And we're not going to bring the cell phone. And we're going to set things up where we're not constantly worrying, what happened, right? Did I get fired? You set up a safety net. And then you create a space, you create an intention, you create a container that's conducive to that intention. This is all rational, right? You take step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, transcendent experience. And then to lay the groundwork for the next transcendent experience, you integrate and ground so that it's not a crash and burn dynamic, right? So then you become competent at ascending and descending. And anyone who's flown a plane knows that the most delicate moments of flying a plane are not up in the air. That's easy. You can do all kinds of things. But it's takeoff and landing. The most delicate point of a human relationship is the moment it's taking off and the moment it's landing, right? And so rational transcendence equals analyzing these things, looking at the data and saying most relationships crash and burn. Most romantic relationships, when they end, they crash and burn, meaning they don't land gracefully. They don't land with gratitude and consciousness and say, okay, now we're departing the plane, let's leave the container and wish you well. No, there are all kinds of, someone ejects halfway up, the pilot leaves, 30,000 feet in the air and the plane crashes with the other partner who never forgives them. And, so you realize that, we're highly incompetent in this territory. But in transcendent experiences as well, to be able to go up and then to gracefully come down and make sense of it, because it's completely different than normal experience. So, and transcendent sex, where we can talk about sex with the divine, is to open ourselves up to be touched by something bigger than ourselves, right? So sex is not just physical, it's mental, emotional, and or physical. It's happening at each of these levels. And then rational empathy and rational transcendence is also about getting better, right? The rational brain is about being efficient, right? We could travel for 40 days and 40 nights by camel and then arrive at the ritual space. But the rational brain says, what are those 40 days doing? The 3 days arriving by plane does 90% of all that, but we've cut the time down, right? So the rational brain is basically about getting excellent at all the other brains, right? And so what does the rational brain say about the transcendent experience as a lover? Well, if you reach the setting where a partner feels safe opening up in the divine as a lover, the rational reptile will learn the recipe of clitoral stimulation, right? Is it this way? Is it that way? Is it this? Is it this? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? What's the pattern? That's the pattern analyzer. What's the pattern of peak orgasm? If you want to be raped and you want to have your perfect rape fantasy, what's the pattern? Right? Well, it has to include this. You have to be wearing black clothes. Okay, that's most of it. Okay, all right. So it's the pattern analyzer. So this is the intersection of sexuality and the four brains. And it's useful to understand, and I'll just add by, saying that when an empath has sex with a sociopath, the sociopath wins. The empath may or may not. And it depends on the level of sophistication. So a competent empath that's aware, first of all, is aware of whether they are having sex with a sociopath or an empath, right? If you can't see the other person enough to understand them, you can't really empathize. You're empathizing with a projection. You're mentally incompetent. You may be in a I wish them well frame of mind, but you don't know who they are. You're mentally incompetent. And so then you may be shocked and disillusioned that the person behaved in a reptilian way. Now, if you are competent as an empath and you want to have sex with a sociopath, meaning someone who's primarily sociopathic, as a gift, as a enjoyable, they're a terrific lover with a nice body who just happens to be highly self-centered and sociopathic. You can negotiate a framework. You can also give, like, I'd like to make this sociopath happy. I'd like to give them pleasure. And so that's my generosity, right? In which case there's no harm, right? But if you think the other person is coming from caring for you and you're going in to care for them and that's exploited and you don't understand you're dealing with a reptile, then there's going to be disillusionment and you will tend to descend down into reptilian territory yourself of pain and anger or revenge, or they hurt me, they took advantage of me, I was being nice to them right? So there can be a descent, and that may be necessary in order to become aware enough of what would, in that case, be called the shadow, right? To understand that every human being has a certain amount of blood flowing to each of these brains at any given moment, and that all of humanity emerges in an evolutionary process through these brains, right? Your ancestors were all reptiles, right? And the grounding, the protocol of dealing with trauma competently is a reptilian protocol. Shut down the feelings, they're overwhelming, fight, flight, freeze, please, manipulate, secure survival and security, right? Those are all there, right? And all it means if you meet a reptile is that they were raised by reptiles, right? So reptiles raise reptiles. Sociopathic environments produce sociopathic people. And the more sociopathic the environment, the more blood is going to go to the sociopathic brain of each person. So it just means you're meeting someone who was raised in a very reptilian way. And if you're mostly raised in, let's say naive empathy, meaning you're treated pretty well, but you were shielded from the reptilian nature of the environment. So you haven't really learned about your own reptilian capacity or other people's, or why. You're psychologically illiterate, right? Well, naivete is not useful in evolution, right? So you will then need to encounter reptiles, descend into your own reptilian brain through pain, learn to develop awareness and competence through pain of why and how that works, then master an ascent again through rational reptilian protocols that graduate into enlightened self-interest and cooperation based on fear and trust, and then see if you can reclaim your humanity, become a human being again. Because if you haven't earned it in that sense, right? If you're someone that, someone demonstrating all the symptoms of sociopathic behavior asks for all your money and you give it to them, you're just rewarding the reptilian behavior that's all around you and increasing your own level of pain to a point you will descend, right? As is appropriate, meaning there's a reason that the rational reptile is the first protocol. There's a reason we have a 200 million year alligator brain, right? There's a competency and an efficiency around that that is important to creating survival and security levels of abundance. So that completes the territory of sex in the four brains.